Welcome in to another episode of the Barnes on Bama podcast. I'm your host, Owen Barnes, and we have a lot to discuss. First things first, I have to thank all of the new subscribers. I know I mentioned this at the top of every episode, but you guys are absolutely incredible. I know just before my last episode dropped, I was just below 500 subscribers. And as of the time of this recording, I'm now over 600. So I just really appreciate all the new people that have joined the channel. I know we're just under 100 episodes, if you can't believe that. Next week, we will record episode 100. I'm trying to think of something special that I can do for that episode. But I just want to appreciate and thank all of you who have been here from the start, or any of the new people that we have here that have joined the channel here recently. As always, the reason I ask you to subscribe is over 80% of the people who watch this channel are not currently subscribed. I know it sounds like a ton of people, but that is the statistics that YouTube gives me. So as always, if you are not subscribed, you could please do so. It really does help me out. Last thing that we'll talk about on this, as we talk about in every episode, is if you hear any ads over on Spotify or Apple, that is because I'm a part of the Believe Podcast Network, and those ads really do help me out. So anything you could do to help out those sponsors, I really do appreciate. But let's get right into the news. We do have a solo episode today, as I've talked about. Not a ton of news coming up. I know next week we're going to have a lot more news because Alabama football will be in SEC Media Days. But we have had a few things that have been announced over the last couple of days. So I want to talk about those, and then we're going to actually talk about the recruiting now that it's slowed down a little bit. I know we talked about some of the recruiting with Stacey Blackwood as well as Clint Lamb, but I want to talk at length about some of that because Alabama went on a run this year in recruiting that was just absolutely phenomenal. First thing I want to talk about. This was announced earlier today, actually, at time of recording. This is recording on Tuesday, July the 8th. Alabama is going to be participating in the Bama in Boutwell. It was called Bama in Boutwell this last season. Now it's going to be called Ballin' in Boutwell. And the reason they're calling it Ballin' in Boutwell is actually Samford, Auburn, and Alabama are all going to be competing in this. Samford is going to be playing Alabama A&M for an exhibition on October the 13th. Auburn is going to be playing Oklahoma State on October the 15th. And then Alabama men's and women's basketball are going to be playing Florida State on October the 16th. Those are all going to be exhibition games. Those are all going to be in Boutwell Auditorium. I know last year the attendance was about 2,000 seats roughly. This is being put on by Hibbett Sports. I know there was a stream last season. I would expect that to be the case again this season. That was a really, really cool event. So I am very curious what that's going to look like this season. I'm sure it's going to be very, very similar. But the reason I talk about this is going to be our first chance, obviously, to see Alabama against a team that we know that they're going to be a little familiar with, because Taylor Bowen, the transfer that Alabama is going to have in the front court, I expect him to start at the 4 for this season, came from Florida State. So this is a team that he's going to be very familiar with. I am very curious to see what this team is going to look like, right? This is going to be one of our first looks at what Alabama basketball looks like. Something really to note in this is just because somebody plays or plays substantially well in this Bama and Boutwell game does not mean that they're going to play long-term throughout the season. If you remember, Houston Millette played in the Bama and Boutwell game as well as the other exhibition, and then he ended up redshirting for the season. Obviously, he burned the red shirt for the North Carolina game and then ended up having to take a medical red shirt for the rest of the season. So just because you see somebody play in that Bama and Boutwell game does not always mean that they're going to absolutely be the guy, that plays in the same role, right? Typically, I would expect that they're probably going to play throughout the season, but they may not play in the same role. This is going to be a situation where don't expect the offense to be perfect. Don't expect the defense to be perfect. This is something where I would expect Alabama and NATOs to try some things out. Obviously, there's very low stakes. This is an exhibition game. If you're aware, maybe unaware, Alabama got beat by 30 against TCU in an exhibition the year they went to the Final Four, right? There have been multiple instances where Alabama just gets dominated in some of these exhibition games. They used to be more closed-door exhibitions. Now some of the exhibitions are becoming a little bit more televised events and events that people are aware of. But especially with this event happening, I am very curious to see. This is going to be one of our first looks at Alabama basketball. As I said, it's going to be on October the 16th. I believe that's Wednesday. So this is going to be kind of our first look at Alabama basketball this upcoming season. So, for anybody that's able to be in attendance, I'm sure that will be a very, very fun event. The other thing that was announced today, and this is something that I alluded to just a few minutes ago, is that Alabama is going to take on SEC Media Days next week. For those of you unaware, SEC Media Days for football takes place in Atlanta and at the Omni Hotel just outside the College Football Hall of Fame area. And that's, so like I said, Alabama, the SEC Media Days are going to be taking on. Alabama's day to be at SEC Media Days is on Wednesday. And the three participants that are going to be there representing the football team outside of Coach Kalen DeBoer are going to be Caden Proctor, Deontay Lawson, and Tim Keenan. To give you an idea, these typically when you hear some of the guys that they bring in for SEC Media Days, this gives you a little bit of an idea as to what the thought process is as it relates to some of the captains. Do I expect that these are going to be the long-term captains? No, but this at least gives you an idea as to who the coaching staff and who the players think represents the team, right? I would expect a guy like Jeremy Bernard potentially to also be a future captain. He was a name that I kind of expected that you might have seen here, but instead you do get three guys that I think really exemplify what you do have here. Something else to note, and I saw this kind of tweeted about on or posted about over on Twitter, was it's really important to see that Caden Proctor is here. And this is just 1 year removed from him obviously leaving to go to Iowa. He comes back, he plays the full season this last season. But it really shows what his teammates think of him, the fact that and what the coaching staff thinks of him, that he has the trust of his teammates and the coaching staff to be able to be at an SEC Media Days, to represent the team, to represent what they are as a team and as a culture. To have a guy like Caden Proctor be able to represent them, that obviously says a lot. And I think, again, him returning, we talked about it last year when it happened, I think that says a lot as well. I think these are three guys that I would expect to be obviously huge impact players all season. You love to see that. I think that these are, major vocal leaders on the team. I think that I would expect major seasons out of all three guys. And we will, of course, cover everything that's said in SEC Media Days. So if you are curious as to what's said and what's talked about, I will try to get as many clips as I physically can. And we will, for what I can't clip, we will talk all about it on Wednesday next week. I will try to record an episode Wednesday night and put that out Thursday immediately following SEC Media Days so that we can talk all about what is happening. Follow me over on Twitter because I will try to live tweet. I'm not going to be in attendance for that. I do have a day job, but I will be trying to live tweet, Blake Byler, Nick Kelly, some of the friends of the show that I do know that will be in attendance for that. I will be live tweeting some of theirs, retweeting and making sure that everybody is aware of what all is said at SEC Media Days. And then we'll talk about it in depth after SEC Media Days. So subscribe to the channel if you are interested in that. And then kind of the bigger topic that I want to talk about today, and this is a topic that we've talked at length about with Clint Lamb and Stacey Blackwood, but I think it still is worth mentioning, is how dominant Alabama football was this season in recruiting. And the reason I say that is, something that me and Clint talked about, and I mentioned at length, is when Kalen DeBoer came into Alabama, the thing that was talked about over and over and over again was he going to be able to recruit? And was he going to be able to recruit the South? That was a very important topic. And the reason that was such an important topic is he just did not have the recruiting classes at Washington or at Fresno State that warranted what people would expect for him to be able to, succeed in the SEC. Because as you may be aware, if you're watching this channel and stay abreast of all this news, Nick Saban was an elite recruiter, but to be the best and to win a national title in college football, there is a certain level of player and a level of athlete that you have to even be able to compete at that level, right? And a lot of that starts with high school recruiting. Can you get some of that in transfer portal? Sure, but a lot of that starts with high school recruiting. And was he going to be able to get there was the question. I knew everyone that you had heard from, Josh Pate or some other people that had kind of spoken to him throughout his time at Washington or Fresno State. And any of the things I had heard coming out about Kalen DeBoer was, yeah, he can definitely recruit. But the question was, can he put it on the field? Well, what he's done is he has put an absolutely insane recruiting class on the field, or I guess have committed thus far. The reason I mention it in that way is Courtney Morgan actually mentioned earlier today that they know that, hey, just because you've got these guys committed, you have to keep these guys committed through December, right? Just because you now have them committed, It's still a long-term recruiting that you have to make sure these guys stay committed and then get them on campus, right? At the end of the day, just because somebody committed at one point doesn't mean anything until they get to campus. But at the end of the day, this is still a credit to Kalen DeBoer. This is a credit to Courtney Morgan. This is a credit to the entire coaching staff that's been able to land these guys and been able to have the success that they've been able to have thus far. And the thing that you have to look at when you look at these recruits is not just the star rankings. The star rankings are obviously phenomenal, with Alabama having 5 stars, with the next closest college football program only having 2 as of this moment. But additionally, what Alabama's been able to do in the state of Alabama. You have a guy like Cedarian Morgan in the state of Alabama. You have a guy like Xavier Crowell in the state of Alabama. Zion Gibson in the state of Alabama. Camarion Johnson in the state of Alabama. And then Zay Hall in the state of Alabama. And then when you're talking in the Southeast, you can go ahead and add in Owen Cabell and Brian Williams and Javar Burnett. And the list just keeps going on and on and on. And Chris Booker and Jamarian Matthews. And right, like every name on this list feels like they're from the state of Alabama. You know, where people are looking at Alabama pulling guys from outside of Alabama or outside of the Southeast. The only guys you're really pulling currently, you know, and I would expect this to change, but the guys you're pulling outside of the Southeast is a Jair Edwards, so a 5-star safety that is a perfect fit for Alabama's system. Then you're also pulling a guy like Max Suter, which if you watched my episode that I did with all the guys that cover Crimson, that was just an insane discussion. You know, me and Stacey Blackwood talked about how Max Suter is an elite fit for Alabama because he's going to be a pass catching tight end with the ability to also be a blocking tight end, right? That inline tight end that can catch and block. And that's not something you're seeing a lot nowadays. Typically it's one or the other, and having a guy that's elite and can actually do both, you know, remind you of some of the Georgia tight ends of years past. That's something that's really, really important when you're looking at, you know, balancing out a roster. You know, when you have a guy that him coming on or off the field does not immediately impact what you're able to do with the football, right? Typically when you have some of the inline blocking tight ends that Alabama has either currently or has had in years past, when you see that guy come on the field, you know that there's only going to be, you know, 4 routes going out, or you know there's only going to be 3 routes going out because that tight end isn't really a receiving threat. Versus if you have a guy like Suter that can block and can receive, it just opens up the passing game because it opens up the amount of routes that are eligible, right? It just opens up the realistic likelihood of what you're able to do. Then you have a guy like Jet Thamala from Nebraska, Samuel Utu from California, J.J. Finch from Indianapolis, and Kelly from Ohio, right? So again, when you're looking at the kind of scope that Alabama is doing, they're focusing on the Southeast. And that was the thing that Kalen DeBoer was talked about at length. Was he going to be able to recruit the Southeast? And a lot of Alabama fans said yes, and a lot of Auburn and Georgia and Tennessee fans said no. And their reasoning was he had never done it. And we tried to say over and over and over again, just because he did not have the recruiting prowess in the South did not mean he did not have the ability to get that recruiting prowess in the South, because he was a huge guy at building relationships and being a genuine person. And that's what we're showing now. You're showing that, as Clint Lamb said last episode, or a couple of episodes ago, when you give a guy like Kalen DeBoer time to build relationships, and a guy like Courtney Morgan time to build relationships, they're going to be able to build the relationships with these players. They're going to be able to show them what they're able to truly do with them in their certain system. They're going to be able to, you know, as you're currently looking, Alabama is able to put a competitive NIL package together. Is it going to be the top of the top? No, but they're able to put a competitive package together and show you, hey, this is how we're going to use you in our system. This is our development plan for you. This is what we think you can be long term. This is where we could potentially see you getting drafted. Like a full, you know, multi-year plan of this is what our total goal for you is as a player. And if somebody likes what that looks like, again, does Xavier Griffin potentially turn down extra money from a USC or from a Texas? Yes. But he likes the plan that Alabama has set forth for him and thinks that long term, that plan is going to have him have more success to get to the NFL. And if he gets to the NFL with greater success, then that means that he's going to get his payday on the back end and it will be great. He's going to be able to play for people he trusts and play for people he likes. And then additionally also get the NFL payday when all is said and done. So yes, he may be turning down some additional upfront money from a USC or from a Texas, but he's still getting it back on the back end because of the success that he expects to be able to have in the NFL, right? And what you're seeing, again, when you're looking at this recruiting class from Alabama and from Kalen DeBoer, this is a recruiting class that feels very Nick Saban-esque. And when I say that, this is what I mean. We have five-star prospects. You have Cedarian Morgan, you have Jair Edwards, you have Jordan Edmonds, Griffin, and Crowell, right? So there's your five stars, with 4 of those committing in the last 10 days. So just an absolutely insane run. You also, to add that, you have Zion Gibson, Nolan Wilson, and Max Suter, all top 100 prospects. I'm going to throw Marion Matthews in there because he's currently in the On3 industry rankings at 101. So I'm going to go ahead and throw him in there in that group as well. But you have now 9 guys that are total top 100 players. Again, this feels like a Nick Saban style recruiting class where you've dominated the South, where you've got the positions that specifically fit your need. They've gone over certain character traits that they're looking for. Again, this is something that we've talked about at length on this show, that when you're looking at corners, Alabama, or secondary, Alabama has gotten substantially longer. Even when you're looking at potentially receivers, Alabama has gotten much taller, right? I talked about that last episode. This is something that Alabama is prioritizing. Alabama is prioritizing length. Now, are there going to be some guys that, hey, this is a can't-miss prospect and I'm going after this guy because he is the guy that I think fits our position the best? Sure, right? I'm not going to say every person that Alabama goes after is going to be the biggest at that position. But it really does feel like Alabama is prioritizing length, especially out wide when you're looking on offense and defense. Again, that secondary for Alabama is getting much longer. That receiving core for Alabama is getting much taller. And I think that they're really fitting the type of mold that Alabama needs them to. Even when you're looking at a guy like Suter, right? 6'5.5", 225, it's a big tight end, right? Some of your tight ends are, 6'3", 6'4", having a guy, pushing 6'6", that gives you a much bigger tight end, and it gives you a really, really good receiving threat. And a tight end that actually plays tight end, not somebody you're converting from receiver, or not somebody that you're having to put a ton of weight on. So I think Alabama has done a really, really good job when it comes to the recruiting class. I don't think that they're done yet. Obviously, Alabama, as of today, only has 19 commits. I would expect that number to be closer to 24, 25. I may be wrong with that, but 24, 25 is a number that just sounds correct to me. I do think that long term, you're having to look at the fact of how settlement's working, how all the transfers are working. So I wouldn't expect Alabama to have front-loaded the class. Again, me and Clint Lamb talked at length about this, as he personally thinks that Alabama has spread out this class so that it makes sense to where you can go on this really, really insane recruiting run. You can be the person that's talked about over and over and over again. Then, as you head into SEC Media Days, you kind of are closing out your class, and then just before football season starts, you've kind of fully solidified your class, and you've been in the news, and you've had all the headlines, right? Because that's something that Alabama has absolutely done. When you have a class and you're able to have 5 stars commit, and you're able to have 10 guys in a matter of have the run over the course of 10 days that you had, with just all the 5 stars and 4 stars and people that you had commit over such a quick succession, that is something that you really have to think about that Alabama may have planned, right? Because from the standpoint of from July the 5th back through about June, I guess you could go back to like June 17th with Thamala. Alabama went on an insane run of just player after player after player after player. And it really seems like Alabama stacked in that recruiting class and really has gotten a lot of effort that, a lot of their efforts are being shown that Courtney Morgan and staff know exactly what they're doing. Obviously, their recruiting efforts are not for naught. And when you're looking at what some of the other, and I don't want to use this as a way to talk trash about someone else, but what some of the other programs in state are doing, that consider themselves a good recruiting program, it's just not the same, right? Kalen DeBoer has proven, hey, he owns this state. He has proven that he has that ability to recruit, and he has proven that, when given time, him and Courtney Morgan and all, Cedarian Robinson around him and everyone around him, right? No matter what position coach it is, Freddie Roach, doesn't matter, right? Any position coach around Kalen DeBoer, the authenticity that they can give and the relationships that they can build with these players is something that players are resonating with and is landing commits. And at the end of the day, when you're talking about Alabama football, first things first, you got to be able to coach on the field. But the thing that will get Alabama fans to give you a little grace is to prove that you can recruit, because then that gives you that ability of hope, right? Even if, hey, you had a bad game, it's like, we got this guy we can go for, right? Now, as we've talked about on this show, if Alabama goes 8-4 this season, you're going to lose that hope real quick, right? You're going to lose that. So you have to prove it on the field as well. 100% recruiting is not going to clear all woes. But if Kalen DeBoer has the season he had last season, which to some Alabama fans was very disappointing, and then came in this offseason and just had a poor showing in the offseason, there would be a ton of Alabama fans looking at this next season as win the title or you're fired. And I think what this offseason has done for Alabama fans is this offseason has allowed Alabama fans to understand, hey, maybe he just needed a little bit of time, right? Maybe we weren't right to judge him in year one after Nick Saban leaves, right? Give him another year, and now this recruiting class is on a level that we would have been very happy with when Nick Saban was the head coach, right? This is a number of 5 stars and a number of top 100 players that Nick Saban would have been happy with. So if this is the case, maybe we just need to give him a little extra time, and when we give him that time, Kalen DeBoer is going to prove to us that we were correct in giving him said time. So that's what I want to talk about when you're thinking about Kalen DeBoer. You really have to think about, how successful he's been, and, the fact that success in my mind has allowed the fan base to understand, like, hey, maybe we need to give him a little bit of grace. And I think that this offseason has done a lot to help with that. So that's what I want to talk about this episode. As I mentioned, thank you so much to all the new subscribers. I do plan to come out with something new and exciting for episode 100. If you have any thoughts or comments, please throw it down in the bottom in the comments. I do read all of them. I would be very curious what anyone has to say as it regards to that, just because it is, not something I expected. The fact that we're hitting 100 episodes here soon, this is something I would like to, show my appreciation to you guys. So if you do know of anything that you would like for me to discuss, or, maybe somebody special to bring on, please throw it down in the comments. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching, and I will catch you in the next episode. Peace.